They say money changes people. I say betrayal reveals them. My name is Blake Neal, and at 45, I'd spent 15 years meticulously building a career as a financial advisor at Onyx Wealth Management in Boston, Massachusetts. My specialty was high net worth portfolios, quiet, methodical work that, frankly, most people, including my wife, Penelope, found mind-numbingly dull. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Penelope was supposedly at a pharmaceutical sales conference in San Diego. I was in our renovated kitchen, poring over client documents, when my phone screen flashed her name. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice eerily calm, almost rehearsed. "I'm not coming home." I slowly set down my pen, the click echoing in the sudden silence of the room. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've met someone. It's been happening for a while." That practiced quality in her voice, the one she used to diffuse difficult clients, sent a chill down my spine. "It's Richard Miles, my regional director." I said nothing, just listened to the shallow rhythm of her breathing through the phone. "He understands me. He sees my potential." She paused, and then, with surgical precision, twisted the knife. "I've already emptied our shared investment account. My lawyer said it was the smart move." The joint account we'd painstakingly built over 12 years of marriage, the one she rarely glanced at but enjoyed the luxurious benefits of. "I understand," I said quietly, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "That's it. You understand?" Her voice cracked then, a flicker of genuine emotion breaking through her carefully constructed facade. "Take care, Penelope." I ended the call and gently placed my phone face down on the counter. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I opened my laptop and logged into our financial portal. She'd initiated a transfer, a cool $212,000 from what she thought was our main investment fund. What appeared on my screen confirmed what I already knew. The transfer was pending approval. My approval. I closed the laptop without taking action. 6 months earlier, I'd noticed the first subtle tremors. Weekend conferences that mysteriously vanished from her company calendar. Dinner charges in downtown Boston on nights she was supposedly out of town. A missed call from Richard at 11 p.m. that she frantically tried to explain away with a convoluted story about a team emergency. Being a numbers guy has its undeniable advantages. You notice patterns. You plan ahead. 3 months ago, I'd quietly restructured our accounts. I created a new joint account with a modest, almost insignificant balance, while stealthily shifting our real assets into a separate, impregnable trust. The paperwork for this intricate maneuver sat neatly in my desk drawer, signed by Penelope herself. Without her ever bothering to read the fine print, she'd been far too preoccupied, texting surreptitiously under the dinner table, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. The system was working exactly as designed. The substantial withdrawal she'd initiated required dual authentication for amounts exceeding $10,000. A critical safeguard I'd specifically requested years ago, foresight proving to be my greatest asset. Tomorrow morning, she would finally discover what pending truly meant. Penelope and I met 17 years ago at a finance conference in Chicago. She worked for Nova Pharmaceuticals, a rapidly ascending company with a promising pipeline of drugs. She was ambitious, undeniably sharp, and possessed an innate ability to work a crowded room with effortless charm. I was, by contrast, quiet, analytical, and noticed the minuscule details that others invariably missed. We were, in many ways, perfect foils, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. When we married 2 years later, we meticulously mapped out our future with the same exacting precision I applied to my clients' portfolios. Leisurely weekend hikes in the New England mountains, elegant dinner parties with colleagues, a rigorous schedule for building our investment accounts, children by year 5, but the children, tragically, never came. After 3 emotionally draining years of trying, the doctor's somber verdict was delivered in his sterile, unforgiving office. My low sperm count made natural conception highly unlikely. Penelope cried silently in the car afterward, tears streaming down her face. I held her hand tightly, promising we'd explore every conceivable option. We never did. Instead, she immersed herself completely in her career. More conferences, more client dinners, more late nights at the office. I, in turn, focused on expanding my client list at Onyx, steadily building a reputation for consistent, unflashy returns that consistently outlasted market volatility. Our beautiful home, once a sanctuary, slowly transformed into a mere way station between her frequent trips and my increasingly long hours at the office. The first genuine crack in our meticulously constructed facade appeared 3 years ago. I'd meticulously planned a romantic weekend in Aspen for our anniversary, a surprise getaway to rekindle the fading embers of our romance. When I enthusiastically told her, she hesitated, a fleeting shadow crossing her face, before reluctantly admitting she'd already committed to a critical sales retreat that very same weekend. "I can't just cancel, Blake," she'd said, her voice laced with a subtle hint of impatience. "This is with the executive team." I went alone, hiking the familiar trails we'd once joyfully explored together, the silence of the mountains a stark contrast to the growing chasm between us. When she called that night, I could clearly hear the distant echo of laughter and the pulsating rhythm of music in the background. More cracks, subtle at first, then increasingly pronounced, followed. Separate vacations became the new, uncomfortable normal. Our conversations, once vibrant and engaging, dwindled to terse logistics about the house or impending bills. Physical intimacy, once a passionate expression of our love, dwindled to occasional, perfunctory encounters that felt less like connection and more like items dutifully checked off a list. Then came Richard Miles, her new regional director. Suddenly, Penelope was volunteering for every committee, every conference, every special project that might remotely cross his desk. "He values my input," she'd gush, her eyes alight with a renewed ambition. "He thinks I'm being wasted in my current role." I noticed the subtle, yet unmistakable, changes in her texts and emails, her phone always face down on the table, her hushed conversations just outside the room, the suddenly password-protected folders on her laptop. Classic, unmistakable signs I'd observed in countless other failing marriages. But never, not for a single moment, had I ever expected to witness them in my own. I didn't confront her. Instead, I watched, I counted, and I quietly, meticulously prepared. I documented the burgeoning patterns in a meticulously organized spreadsheet, dates of mysterious charges, locations that jarringly didn't align with her stated itineraries, inexplicable withdrawals from our joint accounts that far exceeded our agreed-upon spending limits. When she carelessly left her email open one morning, and I saw the undeniable hotel confirmation for a room booked in her name and Richard's, I didn't utter a single word. I simply, calmly, adjusted my plans. The morning after her devastating call, I sat in my home office, staring intently at the transfer request still blinking accusingly on my screen. $212,000, pending approval. With a single click, I could deny it, sending her meticulously constructed scheme crashing down. With another, I could approve it and watch her walk away with nearly everything I had painstakingly built over a decade. I did neither. Instead, I reached for the thick, manila folder I'd meticulously prepared 3 months earlier. Inside lay the complete, irrefutable documentation of our financial restructuring. The new trust, registered solely in my name, now contained a substantial $870,000, the undeniable bulk of our combined investments, now legally and irrevocably separated from the joint account she erroneously believed she'd emptied. Just then, the doorbell chimed. On my porch stood Maria Harper, Penelope's closest friend and a fellow colleague at Nova. Her face was tight with discomfort, her eyes avoiding mine. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside, leading her into the kitchen where I mechanically poured coffee neither of us would touch. "She told me to come get some of her things," Maria said, clutching her purse strap as if it were a lifeline. "She's not coming back, Blake." I know, I replied, my gaze unwavering. Maria's eyes wouldn't meet mine. She asked me to get her jewelry box from the bedroom and her winter clothes. You know about Richard, I stated, not a question, but a cold, hard fact. Maria flinched, a subtle tremor passing through her. I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. How long? I pressed, my voice devoid of emotion. 8 months, maybe longer. She finally met my gaze, her eyes filled with a fleeting sorrow. I'm sorry, Blake. 8 months. Nearly a year of lies, of calculated deception. All while she slept soundly beside me, discussed house renovations, planned holidays, and whispered sweet nothings that now tasted like ash. The jewelry's in the safe, I said, my voice flat. She knows the combination. Always has. Maria didn't move, her unease palpable. She also wanted me to check if her transfer went through. There it was. The true reason for the visit. Not clothes or precious jewelry, but money. I opened my laptop, turning the screen so she could clearly see the blinking message. Pending approval, I said quietly, the words hanging heavy in the air. Dual authentication for amounts over $10,000. It's in our agreement. She'll be furious, Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. That's her choice. After Maria left with a large suitcase brimming with designer clothes, but no financial confirmation, I drove to my office at Onyx Wealth Management. The familiar, comforting routine of client calls and meticulous portfolio reviews suddenly felt hollow, utterly devoid of meaning. At lunch, I walked purposefully to my bank and initiated the next, calculated phase of my plan. By 3 p.m., my phone had 7 missed calls from Penelope. I ignored every single one, the incessant buzzing a dull hum against my resolve. Instead, I drove directly to my lawyer's office. Mr. Thomas Russell had been a valued client for over a decade before becoming a trusted friend. He meticulously reviewed the documents I'd brought. Bank statements unequivocally showing Penelope's attempted, unauthorized withdrawal. Credit card records meticulously revealing doubled expenses in cities that perfectly matched her boss's meticulously documented travel itinerary, and damning hotel confirmations brazenly sent to her personal email address. This is more than enough. Blake, Thomas stated, his voice calm and reassuring as he slid the stack of incriminating papers into a pristine folder. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning. Financial misconduct, marital abandonment. Massachusetts doesn't require fault for divorce, but these will undeniably matter for the eventual financial settlement. I nodded, feeling a strange, unsettling hollowness where a raging anger should have been. This wasn't about revenge. Not truly. It was about pure, unadulterated mathematics. Every action, a principle I'd built my entire career upon, has undeniable consequences. She thinks she emptied our accounts, I said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Let her keep thinking that. For now. 3 agonizing days passed without me answering Penelope's increasingly frantic, almost desperate calls. On the 4th day, I returned home to find her standing defiantly in our living room. She'd used her key, the one she hadn't bothered to leave behind when she unilaterally declared our marriage over. What did you do? She demanded, her meticulously applied makeup a stark, almost grotesque contrast to the wild, untamed fury in her eyes. The money is gone. I calmly set my briefcase down, the soft thud echoing in the tense silence. No, Penelope, the money isn't gone. It's exactly where it's supposed to be. She thrust her phone at me, the screen displaying the bank's unequivocal message, transfer denied. Dual authorization required. Fix this, she hissed, her voice laced with venom. Now. I calmly walked past her to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and took a slow, deliberate sip. We need to talk about the divorce, I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. Divorce? I haven't even... She stopped herself abruptly, her carefully constructed composure momentarily crumbling. I meant to discuss that after. after I got settled. After you took the money, I clarified, my gaze unwavering. Her face hardened, a mask of cold defiance settling over her features. Half of that money is mine. I earned it. Did Richard tell you that? I asked quietly, watching the color drain from her face, her bravado visibly deflating. This isn't about him, she retorted, her voice rising in desperation. It's about trust, Blake, and legally binding financial agreements. She swiftly changed tactics, her voice suddenly softening, adopting a practiced tone of conciliation. I was emotional. I didn't mean to end things like that. We should talk about this properly. Blake, please. This was the Penelope who effortlessly closed difficult sales, the one who artfully convinced reluctant doctors to switch prescriptions. I'd watched her perfect this manipulative technique over years of insufferable dinner parties. Mr. Thomas Russell is handling the divorce, I stated, cutting through her practiced theatrics. You could have your lawyer contact him. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of cold calculation replacing the feigned sincerity. You already have a lawyer? Filed yesterday morning. She paced the living room, her expensive heels clicking rhythmically against the gleaming hardwood floors she'd insisted on installing just last year. You can't just lock me out of our money. Blake, I'll fight this. As is your right, I replied, my calm seeming to infuriate her more than any argument ever could. She snatched a framed photograph from our mantel, a cherished memory of us in Aspen before the separate vacations began, and hurled it with uncontrolled fury against the wall. Glass shattered explosively across the floor, scattering shards like malevolent diamonds. Richard was right about you, she hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. You're pathetic. No ambition, no backbone. I calmly looked at the broken frame, the spiderwebbed glass obscuring my smiling face in the photograph. I'll need your key back. This isn't over, she spat, digging furiously in her purse and flinging the key onto the coffee table with a resounding clatter. Not even close. After she stormed out, leaving a lingering scent of expensive perfume and shattered glass in her wake, I calmly swept up every single shard, meticulously ensuring none remained. Then I poured myself 2 fingers of good bourbon and made a call. She came to the house, I told Thomas, my voice a low rumble. Expect it. She knows the bank notified her about the transfer rejection, then, he asked. Yes, she wants access to our money. Thomas chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. Good luck with that, Blake. The trust is ironclad. The next morning, my assistant at Onyx placed a crisp letter on my desk. It was from Penelope's lawyer, Carlton Neal. The firm's imposing letterhead proudly showcased downtown Boston offices and the names of 3 prominent partners. The letter itself was a demand for the immediate release of jointly held marital assets and threatened swift legal action for financial abuse and restraint of rightful access to shared property. I scanned to the bottom, noting with a grim satisfaction that Richard Miles was brazenly copied on the correspondence. So, her boss was directly involved now, shamelessly leveraging his connections to pressure me. That same afternoon, Thomas filed our amended divorce petition, adding meticulous documentation of Penelope's brazen attempt to empty the accounts without consultation, along with a firm request for a temporary restraining order preventing her from ever entering our home again. They think you're the weak one. Blake, Thomas said over the phone, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. That's good. Let them underestimate you. I didn't bother to respond to the lawyer's blustering letter. Instead, I calmly waited for their next move, knowing with absolute certainty that each aggressive, ill-conceived step they took would only strengthen my already unassailable position. In financial planning, patience is far more than a mere virtue. It is, in fact, an indispensable strategy. 2 weeks later, I received an anonymous text message from an unknown number, coffee. Important information about S. Fenway Park Cafe. 2 p.m. today. Curiosity, a potent force, undeniably overcame my inherent caution. At the appointed time, I sat discreetly in the back corner of the bustling cafe, my eyes fixed on the entrance. 10 minutes later, a woman in a perfectly tailored suit entered, her gaze systematically sweeping the room until her eyes, sharp and intelligent, finally landed on me. Cassidy Tate, Nova Pharmaceuticals HR Director. We'd met at various company functions over the years, exchanging polite pleasantries about market trends and Boston's notoriously unpredictable weather. Now, she sat directly across from me, ordered nothing, and silently placed a small thumb drive on the table between us. "I can't be seen with you," she stated quietly, her voice barely a whisper. This conversation never happened. "What's on the drive?" I asked, my expression carefully neutral. "Emails between Richard and Penelope, going back 14 months. I kept my poker face firmly in place. "Why are you doing this?" She glanced around, a nervous tick at the corner of her eye, before answering. "Richard's done this before, Blake. 3 times that I know of. He relentlessly pursues married women who report directly to him, manipulates them into leaving their husbands, and seduces them with empty promises of rapid promotions. Once they've burned all their bridges, he ruthlessly discards them." "And Nova allows this?" I interjected, a cold sense of dread beginning to coil in my stomach. Cassidy's mouth tightened into a grim line. "His father sits on the board, but there's more at stake now. These emails discuss highly confidential product information that was later, suspiciously, shared with our direct competitors. The implications settled over me like a suffocating shroud. Industrial espionage." She nodded, her gaze piercing. "Richard's been selling proprietary research data, using Penelope to access sensitive files she absolutely shouldn't have. The FBI is already investigating, but quietly, and Penelope. She's either complicit, or she's been grievously manipulated. I honestly don't know which." Cassidy stood abruptly. "I should go. Use that information however you need to, Blake." After she departed, leaving behind a lingering scent of fear and desperation, I ordered a black coffee and immediately plugged the thumb drive into my laptop. The emails confirmed everything I already suspected. The affair, the meticulously laid plans to leave me, Richard's grand, empty promises of promotion, and a lucrative relocation to a supposed Miami office. But the industrial espionage angle was a shocking, entirely new dimension. Screenshots within the files unequivocally showed Penelope accessing secure research databases after hours, brazenly forwarding proprietary information to Richard's personal email account. Whether she truly knew the extent of his nefarious activities remained chillingly unclear. One particular exchange, dated 3 months prior, snagged my attention, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Richard, once you're free from the accountant, we'll move forward with everything. Miami office director title, the works. Penelope, what about his financial expertise? Could be useful. Richard, trust me, we don't need him. Just get what you can from the accounts and we'll handle the rest." They had planned to use me, to bleed me dry, and then to callously discard me like a broken toy. And Penelope, in a fleeting moment of cold calculation, had even considered leveraging my financial knowledge before Richard, with his inflated ego and dismissive wave, had summarily dismissed the idea. I copied the damning files, a cold fury steadily building within me, and then drove directly to Thomas's office. He reviewed the explosive emails in silence while I stared out his large window, my gaze fixed on the distant, unchanging mountains. "This changes everything, Blake," he finally said, his voice grave. "Finally," I replied, a bitter taste in my mouth. The industrial espionage angle could trigger serious criminal charges, a federal nightmare for Penelope. "I don't want her in prison," I heard myself say, surprising even myself with the unexpected realization, "I just want out." "Then we use this as leverage," Thomas concluded, his eyes gleaming with a shrewd, calculated intelligence. "She backs off all the financial claims, signs the divorce agreement on our terms, and we don't share this with the FBI." "And Richard?" I asked, a flicker of something akin to curiosity in my voice. Thomas raised an eyebrow, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. You still care what happens to him? No, I replied, my voice firm. But I care what happens next. That evening, I received a formal settlement offer from Penelope's lawyer. She demanded 60% of all marital assets, the house, and ongoing alimony, a brazen attempt to plunder my future. I forwarded it to Thomas with a single, succinct line, time to use the thumb drive. The very next day, Thomas sent our meticulously crafted counter-proposal. Penelope would relinquish all claims to the trust, accept a one-time settlement of a paltry $50,000, and, crucially, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about both our marriage and her illicit activities at Nova. Attached was a single, carefully selected email from the thumb drive enough to demonstrate the devastating breadth of what we possessed, but not so much as to reveal our entire, formidable hand. Her lawyer's response came within a mere few hours. We need to meet. The meeting was set for Thomas's private office. I arrived early, meticulously reviewed our strategic approach, and patiently waited in the sterile conference room. When Penelope entered with her lawyer, Carlton Neal, a silver-haired man with an exorbitantly expensive suit and a perpetually practiced, unctuous smile, she studiously avoided my gaze. Neal, ever the professional, spoke first. We appreciate your willingness to discuss a reasonable settlement, Mr. Neal. Thomas, without a word, slid copies of our proposal across the polished conference table. Our terms are non-negotiable, Mr. Neal. Neal scanned the document, his practiced smile slowly fading, replaced by a look of growing discomfort. This is absurd. Your client is offering practically nothing. My client is offering silence, Thomas countered, his voice calm and deliberate, which, given the rather unique circumstances, is quite valuable indeed. Penelope finally looked at me, her expression a volatile mixture of raw anger and palpable fear. You're blackmailing me, she hissed, her voice barely controlled. No, I said quietly, my gaze unwavering. I'm protecting myself. Thomas, with a flourish, opened a folder and removed carefully printed copies of a few selected emails. He placed them precisely before Neal, who read them with rapidly growing discomfort, his complexion paling. These are private communications, he objected, his voice strained. These are evidence of corporate espionage, Thomas corrected, his voice sharper now, cutting through the thin veil of denial, which federal prosecutors would find extremely interesting, Mr. Neal. Penelope's composure, once so meticulously maintained, finally cracked. You don't understand, she cried, her voice trembling. Richard said it was just market research, nothing illegal. Yet you accessed secure databases after hours and forwarded highly confidential information to his personal email, I interjected, my voice a cold, hard line. Neal leaned toward Penelope, whispering urgently, his words a frantic, indecipherable buzz. She shook her head several times, vehemently, before he turned back to us, his face a mask of resignation. We need to confer privately. Thomas nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. Take all the time you need, Mr. Neal. The FBI certainly will. They left the room, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Thomas gave me an approving nod. You're holding up well, Blake. This isn't how I expected my marriage to end, I admitted, the raw truth escaping my lips unbidden. 20 minutes later, they returned, Penelope's face a ghostly white, Neal looking utterly resigned. My client is prepared to accept your terms, he announced, his voice devoid of its earlier bluster. With one modification. She wants assurance that you won't forward these emails to Nova or any law enforcement agency. Thomas looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I considered Penelope sitting across from me, the woman I'd once built a life with, the woman who had shattered my world with such casual cruelty. Whatever she'd done, sending her to prison wouldn't erase the deep scar of betrayal. It wouldn't bring back the years, the dreams, the children we never had. Agtate, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Provided the agreement is signed today and the divorce processed without further contest. Neil nodded, a faint sigh of relief escaping him. We'll need to review the final language. Already prepared, Thomas said, producing the meticulously drafted documents, each clause ironclad, each stipulation precisely worded. 2 hours later, it was done. Penelope, her hand trembling slightly, signed away her claims to our assets in exchange for the paltry $50,000 and my unwavering, legally binding silence. The house, once our shared sanctuary, would be sold, with the entire proceeds funneled directly into my trust. No alimony, no further contact, just a clean, surgical severing of ties. As she stood to leave, Penelope paused at the doorway, a haunting question hanging in the air between us. Was any of it real for you, Blake? Any of it? The question caught me off guard, a sudden, unexpected pang in my chest. All of it was real for me, Penelope, I answered truthfully, my voice quiet but resolute. That was the fundamental difference between us. After they left, leaving me alone in the silent conference room, Thomas extended his hand, a warm, genuine smile on his face. Congratulations, Blake. You'll be officially divorced in 90 days. I nodded, a profound hollowness settling over me despite the undeniable victory. What about Richard? Not our problem, Thomas began, but then he stopped, sensing the subtle shift in my expression. What are you thinking, Blake? That Nova deserves to know what kind of man they have running their sales department. I tapped the thumb drive still in my pocket, its weight a tangible reminder of the power I now held, even if Penelope gets immunity. Thomas considered this, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. Technically, our agreement only prevents you from reporting this. It doesn't cover anonymous tips, Blake. Not at all. That evening, a cold resolve settled over me. I created a new, untraceable email account, its sole purpose a swift surgical strike. I meticulously selected only the most damning documents from the thumb drive, those that unequivocally showcased Richard's egregious actions, carefully omitting anything that might directly incriminate Penelope. With a click, I dispatched them to Nova's CEO, every member of their board, and their entire compliance department. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I permanently deleted the account, leaving no digital trace. 3 days later, a small, unassuming article appeared in the business section of the Boston Globe. Pharmaceutical executive resigns amid internal investigation. Richard Miles had abruptly left Nova Pharmaceuticals, effective immediately. No official reason was given, but I knew. Penelope texted me once, a single, accusatory line, "I know it was you." I didn't respond. Some equations, I mused, simply balanced themselves. 6 weeks later, I sat in Thomas's office, the crisp scent of new paper filling the air as I signed the final divorce papers. Thomas handed me a copy of Penelope's new employment agreement, secured through his extensive network of corporate contacts. She'd taken a position with a small pharmaceutical distributor in Phoenix, Arizona. Entry-level sales, a significant pay cut, no corner office, no panoramic views of a bustling city. Richard, by all accounts, was reportedly in Miami, unemployed and under active federal investigation. She had to sell her car to make rent, Thomas commented, a hint of professional satisfaction in his voice. That $50,000 won't last long at her previous spending rate. I felt no satisfaction at this news, no surge of vengeful triumph. Just a dull, almost weary acknowledgement of financial reality, actions, and their inevitable consequences. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived from Nova Pharmaceuticals. The internal investigation, it stated, had uncovered my anonymous tip. Rather than pursuing legal action against me for accessing their proprietary information via the thumb drive, a minor detail in the grand scheme of things, they were, astonishingly, offering me a consulting position with their newly established financial compliance department. We believe your expertise and ethical standards would be an invaluable asset to our organization during this critical restructuring period, the letter read. Cassidy Tate had signed it personally, adding a handwritten note at the bottom, "Justice comes in unexpected forms, Blake." I accepted the offer the very next day. 2 months after finalizing the divorce, an unexpected email popped into my inbox. It was from Maria, Penelope's former friend. "Blake, I thought you should know that Penelope and Richard have separated. He never followed through on any of his promises. She's struggling, but too proud to admit it. She asked about you, whether you were seeing anyone new. I told her I wouldn't discuss your life with her. Just thought you should know. Take care, V." I closed the email without responding. The true justice, I realized, wasn't in Penelope's downfall or even in my newly secured financial stability. It was in the quiet, undeniable restoration of truth. The numbers, finally, balancing as they should have all along. The revenge wasn't about taking something from her, but in finally recognizing and reclaiming my own worth. 1 year after Penelope's late-night call from San Diego, I stood in the foyer of my new home in the Boston suburbs. It was smaller than our previous house, but it was solely mine, with a breathtaking view of the changing leaves on the mountains from the back deck. The consulting work with Nova had organically evolved into a full-time position, heading their innovative new financial compliance division. I'd meticulously built a team dedicated to transparency and ethical oversight, work that mattered far beyond just accumulating wealth. My phone buzzed, a text from Sierra Grayson, a brilliant corporate attorney I'd met through Nova's legal department. Our third date was scheduled for tonight. Dinner at a quiet, intimate restaurant downtown where we could continue our conversations about challenging hiking trails and the intricacies of financial regulation topics that would have bored Penelope to tears, but that Sierra found as engaging and fascinating as I did. I hadn't heard from Penelope in months. Through mutual connections, I knew she'd left the pharmaceutical industry entirely, taking a teaching position at a community college in Arizona. A simpler life than she'd planned, perhaps, but quite possibly a far more honest one. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The hollow feeling had, at long last, completely disappeared. The betrayal no longer defined me. It had simply become a painful, yet ultimately transformative, chapter in my history, a chapter that had, against all odds, eventually led me to something undeniably better. I locked the door behind me and walked purposefully to my car. The trust fund that Penelope had so brazenly attempted to empty now quietly funded scholarships for deserving students pursuing financial ethics certifications. A small, yet significant, way of transforming what was meant to harm into something profoundly constructive. The mountains loomed ahead, solid and unchanging, as I drove toward the city. Some things, I mused, could always be counted on. Some calculations, I had finally learned, always balanced in the end. I had been right about the numbers all along, but more importantly, I'd finally gotten the human equation right as well.